Hello, this is the non-dual lectionary for the 11th Sunday after Pentecost in year C, and we're continuing with Luke. We've got a story here that I think doesn't, it's not Jesus as teacher, which we've talked about sometimes recently, but more Jesus manifesting, living out true nature, non-dual recognition in the world. So let's jump into it. As I said, continuing with Luke. Chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it to water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things being done by him. So it strikes me there's two things we could talk about with this. I'm only going to focus on one. The first is just the healing story and miracles in general. We'll have more of those coming up, so we'll dig into what we might take away from that. But the second thing is and I think it's what this story is highlighting, right? The fact that he's curing on the Sabbath, that's against the rules. And what does that bring out, right? As far as living out that true nature, non-dual recognition in the world. And the biggest thing to me is it's not so much there's anything wrong, right, with a rule or a guideline that says, hey, take time away on the Sabbath. That could actually even be supportive of a spiritual contemplative practice, something towards pointing towards recognizing non-dual nature, right? I mean, there are all sorts of teachers who suggest, set aside two times in the day, right? 20 minutes or an hour in the morning, 20 minutes, hour in the evening, meditate every day, right? And so setting aside a day for rest, for prayer, for meditation might be a great prescription, right? A great guidance towards realizing non-dual nature. But and I think this is a theme we keep coming across is when it becomes a rule, when it becomes a rigid box, um, the true nature just can't be captured by any rule, any prescription, if you do these things, then you get this. That's psychological self. That's ego self. That's what, uh, that's the operating system that wants to, know exactly what to do and then what result will come on the other end. And so Jesus is, just kind of plainly operating from what you might call like pure freedom here, right? Um, and that doesn't mean ignoring rules necessarily, right? But he's aware of the rule. He obviously knows that and just decides this is more important here. Simple as that, right? And again, anything that becomes a prescription, that becomes a rigid rule, is going to be in a way like not consistent at some point, right? With manifesting, living out that non-dual recognition. I mean, I can say from my own experience, and again, coming back to that, meditate twice a day, like that kind of guidance from a teacher, I got to a point where I just noticed that I was having these internal, like, oh, I should do that, but I don't really feel like it right now, and like ongoing. And at some point, I just stopped. I took a few months and I just did not meditate. Um, but in what it did is it just kind of loosened up that kind of, I should be doing this, but I don't want, any time that it feels like a should is going to be a trick for that, right? Not that there aren't times to push through to, not to, keep going even though something's uncomfortable or anything like that. That's not the point, right? But it really, when I came back around on the other side of it, really freed things back up to where, I could do still that kind of, follow that guideline, but no longer as this like internal struggle about what to do. Or, should I be doing this? Oh, but I don't feel like it. There's still times when I don't feel like it or whatever, but the struggle just kind of relaxes. And I think again, like that's what we get out of the story a little bit, and also just, a kind of a direct pointer of not, again, not as a teaching, right? Not as like, hey, you should act freely, or you shouldn't follow guidelines or rules or anything like that, right? Like that's not the point. It's just kind of an exhibit or a model of like, hey, if you think you've got the rule or you think you've got the prescription about what to do and how to do it, and that that's going to be the way that you recognize true nature, that you're living out whatever we call it, right? That recognition or that your divine nature or whatever, you're probably wrong because that ultimate freedom expands beyond any boundaries, beyond any prescriptions. And so, Jesus here is primarily just in touch with what is, and what is never bound by, any prescription, any box, any rule.